In a desolate, ruined hall, the man they called the strongest sage kneels in defeat, blood dripping onto the cold stone floor. Before him stands his final opponent. The victor, a demon with a cross etched into his forehead, scoffs at the sage's title, calling it a load of crap. Crackling with dark energy, the demon raises his massive blade, asking the fallen sage if he has any last words before he ends his life. But instead of fear, a smirk spreads across the sage's face. The demon looks on, confused by this unexpected reaction. The sage calmly announces that everything is finally ready. As glowing lights appear on the ground, the demon asks what he's talking about. Suddenly, a brilliant light erupts from a massive magic circle. The sage has activated the forbidden reincarnation arts. The demon screams in agony, realizing he's been made a sacrifice. The scene shifts to the main residence of the House of Radcliffe. A woman checks in on her son, Eddie, who is resting in bed. The 6-year-old boy smiles, reassuring his mother that he's okay. Despite his smile, his mother worries, telling him he still doesn't look very well and just needs a bit more rest. After his mother promises to check on him later, she leaves the room. The moment the door closes, Eddie collapses onto his pillow, letting out an exhausted sigh. Lying there, he recalls his past life. He was the strongest sage who devoted his life to saving people. On the verge of death, he used the Demon King as a sacrifice to reincarnate, hoping for a quiet life where he could use magic for himself. The reincarnation was a success. He was reborn as the youngest son of this house into a loving family. And today, on his 6th birthday, all the memories and knowledge from his past life came rushing back into his young mind. He reflects on the experience. The sudden flood of information was so overwhelming that it almost caused his new soul to collapse. His new life is a peaceful one. The House of Radcliffe is a wealthy family, and as the youngest child, he's been showered with love. He hasn't used his magic yet, aware of the dangers in this world. He sits up in bed, feeling much better now that the initial shock has passed. His body feels as good as new. With his body and soul now stable, he closes his eyes to focus. There's something he wants to check. He utters a command in his mind, "Open status." Instantly, a holographic interface materializes around him. He analyzes the stats. His name is Eddie, level 1, with the job of the sage. He notes that having 10 vitality and mana at his age, without any training, is impressive. Anxious to test his old skills in his new body, he decides his first priority is to start leveling up. But he needs a place to do it. He glances out the window, and his eyes land on the forest just behind the mansion. It seems like the perfect spot. He quietly slips out of the mansion. The forest is close, so he can get back quickly if needed, and it's likely to have some weak monsters to practice on. Almost immediately, he finds what he's looking for. A small, bouncing red slime appears from the bushes. The slime notices him, gets angry, and launches itself forward. Eddie picks up a small stone, thinking this monster is the perfect opponent for a 6-year-old's first battle as he easily sidesteps the attack. He crouches, remembering everything about this type of monster. Red slimes can either hurl themselves forward or use weak fire magic. After dodging another lunge, he recalls their greatest weakness and clenches his fist, preparing to strike. He knows its weakness, the core located in the middle of its body. With a single, well-aimed strike, the slime explodes. To his delight, the slime dropped a core, an extremely rare material. He picks it up, happy with his lucky find. He checks his status again. His mana has increased to 30, and more importantly, he's acquired 2 new spells, a weak fire spell and a detection spell. He's pleased to have learned both fire and detection magic from a single red slime. He chuckles to himself, thinking his stats are still fitting for a child. But as he reviews his status, something catches his eye, making him pause. His jaw drops. His magic capacity is over 119,000, attributed to a reincarnation bonus. He's stunned, remembering that even in his past life at level 99, his capacity was only around 90,000. He's completely baffled. He's only level 1, so how could his stats be so high? And what in the world is a reincarnation bonus? Just as he's reeling from the shock, a distant scream cuts through the silence of the forest. He wonders if someone is in trouble. Realizing he can use his newly acquired spell, he immediately activates detection. He's shocked once again. The spell displays a highly detailed map of the area, a feat that should be impossible for level 1 magic. He can't help but laugh at the absurdity of his power, but he quickly snaps out of it, remembering the scream he heard. He needs to find its source. His detection map shows him the situation instantly. A group of orcs, led by an orc king, has surrounded a lone human. It's clearly an attack. He quickly weighs his options. There's no time to go back for help, but his only offensive magic is a weak fire spell. He stares at the ground, trying to figure out what he can possibly do in this situation. Suddenly, an idea forms. He might not be able to defeat them, but he can definitely use his fire magic to create a distraction. He had wanted to use magic only for himself in this life, but he couldn't just stand by and let someone die. With his mind made up, he gets to his feet and runs towards the danger. A young princess knight named Clarice stands cornered. Her guards are down, and a menacing orc king tells her there's no escape, crudely demanding her surrender. Clarice glares back with defiance, shouting that she would never yield to the likes of him. From the safety of the bushes, Eddie surveys the scene. 8 orcs, including their king, against 1 human. He asks himself what he should do. He knows his level 1 magic can't defeat the orcs. The best he can hope for is to blind them. With negotiations clearly off the table, he decides to target the orc king first. Eddie casts his fire spell, but the result is far beyond his expectations. A massive explosion of fire erupts, engulfing the orc king and its minions in a devastating blast. The sheer force of the explosion throws Eddie backward, his eyes wide with shock at the power he just unleashed. The once dense forest clearing is now a smoking crater. The remaining orcs look on in utter confusion, staring at the spot where their boss just stood. Clarice can only stare, completely stunned and unable to process what just happened. Eddie is equally bewildered. He's positive he used the weakest level 1 fire spell he had, yet the destructive power was off the charts. It all clicks into place. He realizes the massive number he saw wasn't an error in his status. It's his actual, terrifyingly high magic capacity. Clarice snaps out of her shock and rushes towards the remaining orcs, but then she spots Eddie and immediately changes course, thinking he's just a lost child. Before he can react, she scoops him up into her arms, leaving him completely bewildered by the sudden turn of events. Pressed against her armor, he tries to shout that they need to get out of there, but his voice is muffled. As she carries him away, the surviving orcs give chase, vowing to kill them both. Clarice tries to reassure him, saying everything will be fine. She vows to protect him, even at the cost of her own life. But as she holds him, he can feel her trembling with fear. Eddie understands he has to take control. Realizing he can regulate his power by adjusting his mana output, he prepares another spell as the orcs close in. He unleashes another blast, this time creating a thick cloud of smoke to cover their escape and block the orcs' path. In the chaos, Clarice trips over a root, sending them both tumbling to the ground amidst the screams of the burning orcs. She lands hard on top of him, letting out a pained groan. She quickly scrambles off, apologizing profusely and asking if he's hurt. Eddie calmly tells her he's fine. Eddie looks over at Clarice's unconscious comrades, scattered across the clearing. His expression is serious. He can hear more monsters approaching, drawn by the smell of blood. If they leave the knights here, they'll be eaten. Clarice clenches her fist, knowing it too. He takes a steadying breath. Despite his desire for a peaceful life, he knows he has to help them all. He senses his own power growing. By killing the orcs, he's gained both wind and sleep magic, and his level has increased. An idea begins to form. Clarice finally asks the question that's been on her mind. Was he the one who cast those unbelievably powerful spells? He simply tells her to hold on. He cuts her off, telling her to be quiet and listen because they're short on time. Startled by his sudden authority, Clarice can only nod. When she asks who he really is, he quickly lays down his conditions, demanding she tell no one about what she saw or that she met him. He then switches back to his child persona, nervously explaining that he just snuck out to practice magic to surprise his parents. A young boy named Eddie tugs on a woman's sleeve, his face flushed with worry. With puppy dog eyes, he begs her to keep his secret, afraid of what might happen if anyone finds out. The woman, a knight named Clarice, looks over at her fallen comrades, wondering if she'd gone too far. Trying to bargain, she offers to help Eddie carry them if he promises to stay quiet, but her words only confuse him. Eddie's face lights up as he thanks her. Clarice, touched by his courage, formally introduces herself and swears on her name to keep his secret. With the deal struck, the two prepare to leave. But Eddie has other plans. He quickly covers Clarice's mouth with his hand, whispering, "Good night, lady," as he uses his magic to put her to sleep. Just as she loses consciousness, Clarice's eyes glow. For a split second, she sees a vision of Eddie reaching out before everything fades to black. With a flick of his finger, Eddie unleashes a powerful gust of wind, effortlessly lifting Clarice and her companions into the air while he watches from below. He lets out a sigh of relief as he gently lowers Clarice to the ground, the magic dissipating around her. He's almost finished with his secret rescue mission. Watching them float away, Eddie thinks to himself that his wind magic should be enough to carry them to the edge of the forest. He's glad he managed to lure it back there. His task complete, Eddie turns to head home, planning to sneak back into bed and pretend nothing happened. But the narrator reveals that after his 6th birthday, his life would never again be lived in the shadows. Suddenly, a menacing presence rumbles through the forest, shaking the very air. A dark, terrifying voice echoes from the shadows, calling out for the sage. It's getting closer to Eddie's home. The scene flashes back to Eddie's previous life, where people whispered about him, calling him the strongest sage. He recalls how that power always left him isolated and alone. Back in the present, a powerful gust of wind, the very same magic he just used, slams against the side of his family's mansion. Eddie had carefully placed the unconscious Princess Clarice in a safe spot, planning to let her rest while he dealt with the aftermath of the orc attack. But as he turns his attention to the fallen soldiers, a familiar voice calls his name, startling him. It's his mother. She runs towards him, frantic with worry, but overcome with relief to see that he's unharmed. Seeing her distress, Eddie is hit with a wave of guilt. He looks down at his feet, realizing he messed up and made her worry. His mother grabs his hand, her voice filled with urgency as she tells him they have to get out of there immediately. Confused, Eddie asks where they're going. She pulls him into a tight embrace, her hands trembling as she promises to protect him. But Eddie can only wonder what she's trying to protect him from. He looks up at her tear-streaked face, completely bewildered, and asks the simple question, "Why are you crying, Mommy?" His mother breaks down sobbing, mentioning his father and brothers. As she holds him, a sense of doom fills the air, and the ground beneath them begins to shudder. Suddenly, Eddie pushes her back, a gust of wind swirling around him. His mother, caught off guard, stops mid-sentence, her eyes wide with shock at his sudden display of power. With a calm but determined look, Eddie tells her he's going to have her sleep for a bit. He then turns and walks towards the gate, sensing a familiar and powerful mana. He recognizes the energy instantly. It's a mana he hasn't felt in a very long time. Just then, a huge cloud of smoke and debris erupts from the direction of his home. Through the smoke, a terrifying figure emerges. It's a demon with long black hair and a single horn, and it has one of Eddie's family members caught in its suffocating grip. With a sadistic grin, the demon tightens his grip, mocking his captive's weakness. He introduces himself as the guardian of the Forbidden Forest. The man, Eddie's father, struggles to breathe, desperately telling his other 2 sons to run. But the boys can only cry out in horror as they watch their father being choked. The guardian's eyes glow with menace as he demands they hand over the youngest child. He threatens to deal with the other kids first, revealing that he already knows the sage has awakened. Fueled by fury and a father's love, the man glares back, shouting through the pain that he will never hand over any of his sons. The demon's patience runs out. He screams that if they won't cooperate, he'll just kill them all. His mind is made up. From out of the darkness, a small, unassuming voice cuts through the chaos. "Hey!" Eddie calmly approaches the towering demon, who is still choking his father. With the innocence of a child, he asks, "What are you doing, mister?" His brothers watch, stunned. His father panics, yelling for Eddie to get away. But the guardian simply sniffs the air, a slow smile spreading across his face as he recognizes the rotten soul of the sage. The demon's eyes widen with glee. "So you're the sage, brat?" He sneers. Playing dumb, Eddie cocks his head and asks if a sage is something you can eat. With a booming laugh, the guardian tosses the father aside, declaring that the sage is the one and only threat to his existence as the Demon King. He vows to crush the sage before he can grow any stronger. Eddie's brothers rush to their injured father while Eddie himself stands firm, watching the scene unfold with an unervingly calm expression. Eddie begins to calmly walk around the demon, questioning why a supposed Demon King would show up on the front lines all by himself, without any of his loyal servants. A sly grin appears on Eddie's face as he delivers the final taunt, suggesting that maybe, just maybe, he's no king at all. The demon snaps, enraged by the little boy's mockery. Eddie waves off the demon's anger, saying he doesn't really care. He has just one simple question for the so-called guardian. The shadows fall across his face, his innocent expression gone. In a chillingly low voice, Eddie asks, "What did you do to my family?" An immense pressure fills the air, an aura of pure killing intent radiating from the 6-year-old. The demon, for the first time, begins to sweat, shivering uncontrollably. The guardian stares, dumbfounded by the sheer power radiating from this child. As Eddie takes a single step, the ground beneath his feet cracks under the weight of his mana. The demon squints, trying to process what he's seeing. Status windows are floating around the boy, but something feels completely wrong. It suddenly clicks. The guardian realizes with a jolt of shock that despite the overwhelming pressure, the kid's status screen shows he only has 60 mana points left. Eddie stares him down, thinking to himself that the demon is right. He then mocks him out loud, questioning how he could act so mighty when he couldn't even sense Eddie's low MP. The demon flies into a rage, vowing to destroy Eddie and his family. Meanwhile, Eddie calmly calculates that with only 60 MP left, he has just enough for 2 weak spells. His father, sensing the dark magic, screams for them to escape, but Eddie simply tells him, "It's fine, Daddy." As the guardian lunges forward, screaming for him to die, Eddie declares that 2 shots are all he needs. He thinks about how combining his weak fire and wind spells will feed the flames with oxygen, turning them into a massive explosion. He tells himself, "I'll handle it." Eddie unleashes his combined magic. A massive, swirling vortex of black flames and wind erupts from his hands, instantly engulfing the demon. The guardian can only let out a final, agonizing scream as he's consumed by the inferno. The massive inferno dies down, leaving only smoke in its wake. Eddie lets out a small sigh, the immense power leaving him drained. His father and brothers can only stare, whispering his name in utter disbelief. His father, still in shock, asks what he just did. Internally, Eddie cringes. He realizes he's messed up and gone way overboard once again. With a bashful smile, Eddie strikes a pose, puffing out his chest as he proudly announces that it looks like he defeated the Demon King. His act is completely convincing. Later that night, the family gathers in the mansion's main hall. The mood is heavy as they try to process the day's unbelievable events. His father hangs his head in shame, apologizing for failing to protect them as the head of the family, calling himself a good-for-nothing. But his family quickly jumps to his defense. His eldest son says they were the useless ones, while his wife insists he's a hero for helping her and the children escape. Eddie narrates that after the battle, his mother awoke and used her healing magic on everyone. After he explained what happened in the forest, she also healed the unconscious Princess Clarice. With everyone safe, his father finally turns to him, his expression deadly serious as he calls out his name. It was the question Eddie had been dreading. His father asked him point blank, "How can you use magic like that?" Eddie had already prepared his answer. He starts by saying he had a dream where he could use magic. He continues his fabricated story, claiming he went into the forbidden forest to test his new dream-given powers. His father yells, shocked he'd enter such a dangerous place. Eddie then claims he learned magic by defeating the monsters there. He finishes his tale, explaining he heard a scream and found Princess Clarice being attacked, saving her with his newfound magic. Then, feeling confident, he decided he could probably take on the Demon King too. His parents are speechless. Eddie knows it's a terrible excuse, but he can't risk telling them about his past life, fearing he'd lose the family he's grown to love. His father asks for confirmation. He used magic that powerful for the very first time today? Eddie simply replies. He reflects on his past life. As the strongest, he was a target. People didn't admire him. They feared him with disgust. That fear forced him to walk a path of solitude, utterly alone. After reincarnating, he finally found a place to belong with the Radcliffe family. He was terrified that today, the day his power was revealed, would be the last day he could call them his own. As his father quietly processes the story, Eddie braces for the worst, his head hung low. He treasures these people more than anything. But the reaction he gets is not what he expected. Instead of fear or suspicion, his parents' faces light up with pure joy and excitement. They shout in unison, "You are a genius, huh?" Eddie is completely stunned. His father scoops him into a massive hug, exclaiming that his cute little son is amazing. He quickly corrects himself, declaring that Eddie isn't just a genius, but a child prodigy. His mother immediately grabs him for another hug, calling him her angel and gushing about how proud she is that he fought the evil Demon King. Even his brother pats his head, equally proud. Instead of being cast out, they're celebrating. The whole family joins in for a group hug, their faces beaming with pride and love. They decide to celebrate with a huge feast. Though he complains they're hugging too tightly, Eddie can't hide his blushing smile. Surrounded by their warmth and acceptance, a genuine, heartfelt smile spreads across Eddie's face. After 2 lifetimes, he finally found what he was searching for, a true home. Meanwhile, in a quiet guest room, Princess Clarice begins to stir. As her eyes flutter open, she looks around the unfamiliar, elegant room, groggily wondering where she is. In a quiet room of the Radcliffe mansion, the pendulum of a grandfather clock swings steadily. The great sage, now reborn as a 6-year-old boy named Eddie, sits patiently with a woman. A man announces it's time to wake Princess Clarice. But before they can, Eddie quickly excuses himself, dashing off to the restroom. Once alone, Eddie lets out a sigh of relief. With his memories as a great sage returned, the first thing he needs to do is confirm his own abilities in this new life. He pulls up his status window. His name is Eddie, a level 10 sage. But what catches his eye is the last line. A magic capacity of over 200,000, a bonus from his reincarnation. He thinks to himself that having mighty class dark magic means he's also inherited the Demon King's skills. But without enough mana, those skills are useless for now. He also notes his new examination and transfer magic abilities. His new skills are pretty straightforward. Examination magic lets him view other people's status, while transfer magic lets him teleport himself or others to different locations. He always knew he'd inherit the power from his past life, since mana is tied to the soul. But he still can't quite understand the reincarnation bonus. He assumes his stats got a massive boost simply because he was reincarnated. With a dawning realization, it hits him. This bonus has made him even stronger than he was in his past life as the world's most powerful sage. A look of determination crosses his face. To maintain the peaceful life he's always wanted, he must hide his true strength. But then he remembers with a grimace that he's already used his magic in public, twice. Back in the main room, Eddie and his parents are waiting. Suddenly, the door opens, and a woman in armor steps inside, calling his name. It's Princess Clarice. She's relieved to see that he's safe and feeling better. Eddie puts on his most innocent, childlike smile, thanking her for carrying him to safety. But behind the smile, Eddie's old mind is at work. He can tell from her expression that despite her words, Princess Clarice is still feeling down about something. He reasons that she must have been summoned here. He recognizes the coat of arms on her armor, a symbol he's seen before in his previous life. She is Princess Clarice of Mage, a small country in the north. Her kingdom is located right on the border of the Demon King's territory, making it a constant battleground. Eddie remembers his past life. Once his name became famous, he was flooded with requests from various countries to fight monsters and even subjugate the Demon King. It was an endless cycle of battle. He realizes he has to be careful. If she discovers the true extent of his power, his new, peaceful life will be over before it even begins. Clarice, looking nervous, tries to speak. Princess Clarice turns to the Margrave Radcliffe and asks to be left alone with his son for a moment. The Margrave looks surprised, but agrees. Eddie is stunned that his father is leaving him alone with a princess. His father simply pats him on the head and tells him not to be rude. As his father leaves, Eddie nervously asks Clarice if it's okay for a princess to be alone with a child. A moment of silence hangs in the air. Clarice just chuckles, and Eddie, feeling awkward, tries to break the ice, admitting he's never spoken to a princess before. He asks her which country she's from, and she formally introduces herself as the third princess of Mage. His suspicion confirmed, Eddie plays along, cheering her on for searching for the hero. He just hopes she doesn't ask him to do anything strange. But Clarice reveals she received a prophecy that the Savior had awakened and came to this land to protect them. She suddenly calls his name, Eddie, and with a knowing look, tells him he's a very mysterious boy. Eddie's cheerful act falters. Clarice's voice echoes in the now tense atmosphere. She reveals that his father told her he defeated the Demon King by accident, but she asks him directly, "There's no way that's true, is it?" Caught off guard, Eddie plays dumb, asking what she means. But his expression quickly shifts, his childlike innocence replaced by the sharp, analytical gaze of the sage. Clarice doesn't back down. She tells him what she saw in the Forbidden Forest, a spell of unimaginable power that completely incinerated the Orc King to protect her and her knights. With conviction in her eyes, she asks him directly, "You're the Savior, aren't you? The Sage of Prophecy." Eddie's mind races. He realizes they knew about both the Demon King and the awakening of Sage. And now that the Demon King has been defeated in the very land Clarice was sent to, the connection is obvious. He knows it's over. If they start a proper investigation into who defeated the Demon King, the truth about his identity will inevitably come to light. Seeing no way out, Eddie makes a decision. He'll stop trying to deceive her, but he makes one thing clear. He has no intention of becoming anyone's savior. Clarice suddenly grabs his hand, her voice filled with emotion. "Wrong," she says. "You've already saved my life." Tears begin to stream down her face as she remembers the horror of that day. She was forcibly transported to the forest by the Demon King, where she lost her precious knights. An awkward silence fills the room. Clarice berates herself for being useless, while Eddie groans internally. Having avoided people in his past life, he has no idea how to comfort someone. Dropping his childlike act, Eddie speaks with the wisdom of a sage. He tells her the knights must have been like family to her. He then offers his family's carriage, so she can bring their bodies back to her country with the honor they deserve. His unexpected maturity and kindness break through her grief. Overwhelmed with emotion, Clarice pulls him into a tight hug, crying uncontrollably. Smothered in the embrace, a flustered Eddie can only listen as she apologizes through her tears, asking for just a moment to let it all out. After that emotional moment, Clarice finally calmed down. And to Eddie's immense relief, she agreed to keep his identity a complete secret. She had asked him if he truly didn't want the prestige of being the savior. Eddie had just smiled, replying that he just wanted to keep living his current, peaceful life. Eddie then questioned if this meant she didn't want him to come to her country. But Clarice, full of gratitude, assured him she would never ask him to do something that would displease him. However, she gave him a solemn warning. She would try to dissuade her father, the king, but her country wasn't the only one aware of the Savior's awakening. If word got out, other nations would undoubtedly come asking for his help. She looked at him with genuine worry, telling him she feared for his safety. His parents, listening in, were shocked. While his father dismissed it, his mother couldn't hide her concern for her 6-year-old son. But Eddie just smiled confidently. He announced that he would be starting school next month, declaring it the perfect place to hide in plain sight, surrounded by other children his age. 10 days later, the time had come. Eddie and his mother arrived at the grand gates of the Royal Academy for his pre-entrance examination. As they walked through the impressive school grounds, Eddie took in the sights, his mind already calculating his next move. The day was simple enough. Buy textbooks and gym clothes, take a few academic tests, and a health checkup. But the most important event of all was the magic aptitude test. This test used a special magical tool, a crystal orb that would measure a person's aptitude for magic and print out a list of all the spells they could potentially learn. The results of this test would divide students into classes based on their abilities from F rank to A rank. Class A was reserved for the best of the best, the honor students destined to lead the country, and being placed there meant attracting a lot of unwanted attention. Eddie knew this was the biggest hurdle to his peaceful life. If he took a normal examination, the machine would spit out a ridiculously high number, placing him squarely in the spotlight. He had to avoid Class A, no matter what. His mother, meanwhile, was lost in her own worries, wondering if the test would reveal her son's genius and get him kidnapped. Eddie just chuckled nervously because he was already prepared. So, he thought to himself, I'm taking a countermeasure. As his mother heads off to the entrance procedure briefing, Eddie waves goodbye and prepares to head into the examination hall on his own. The day is a blur of activities. He gets his height measured, needing a stool to reach the mark. He calmly takes his written tests while other kids around him are crying from stress. Through it all, Eddie remains completely unfazed. Finally, the announcement comes for all the kids taking the magic aptitude test to line up. Eddie looks down at his paper. His moment has arrived. He watches as other children take the test, the crystal orb glowing faintly for each of them. He confirms that the tool is indeed real, and that his plan will need to be perfect. Another student finishes, and Eddie glances at the printed result. He notes with satisfaction that the printing paper is exactly as he'd hoped. Just then, the teacher calls his name. Next up is E. Radcliffe. Eddie calmly walks up, sits down, and places his hand on the crystal orb. For a tense moment, nothing happens. The room is silent. The teacher leans in, confused, wondering if the machine is broken. But then, the orb begins to hum, and an incredibly bright light starts to radiate from within it. Suddenly, the light explodes in a brilliant flash, forcing the teacher to shield her eyes. At the same time, the printer next to the machine goes wild, spitting out paper at an alarming rate. The paper just keeps coming and coming, piling up on the floor in a massive heap. The teacher panics, shouting that the printing won't stop and she has no idea what's happening. The other kids start chattering in amazement, shocked by the impossibly long scroll of paper. Amidst the chaos, Eddie puts on his best poker face, looking around as if he's just as confused as everyone else. And so, at the prestigious Royal Academy, the magic aptitude test for the reincarnated sage devolved into utter chaos, burying the examination room under a mountain of paper that showed no signs of stopping. During the magic aptitude test, the enchanted orb suddenly went wild, spitting out a seemingly endless scroll of paper and causing a commotion. The results were shocking. A triple S class in magic, a rank so high that the paper just kept printing out the enormous list of spells he could learn. As the other students chattered, Eddie felt all eyes on him. The examiner was sweating, realizing that if the result was real, this boy was a prodigy unseen since the Academy's founding. Sensing his chance in the chaos, Eddie stood up. He confidently declared that the magic tool must be broken. The two girls behind him were stunned, whispering that nothing like this had ever happened before. To prove his point, Eddie revealed a different result sheet he had prepared. He announced he would test his theory on another student's assessment tool. The paper he held showed the results for a student named M. Radcliffe, who had a dismal F rank in magic aptitude, only capable of learning slow-footed magic. The other students whispered in shock, recognizing the notoriously low scores of the Radcliffe family's second son. While everyone was distracted by the terrible results, Eddie slyly hid his real one. A flashback reveals Eddie's trick. He had swapped his own results with the other students during the commotion. The instructor, completely fooled, concluded the machine was indeed broken and let Eddie leave with the F-rank paper. The blond boy cheerfully explained that the terrible results weren't his, but belonged to his brother, Max. He offhandedly mentioned that his mother's habit of keeping mementos came in handy. In the corner, Eddie couldn't hide his satisfied smirk. His plan a success, Eddie calmly walked out of the academy, leaving the confusion behind him. But as he walked, he overheard a worried voice from another room asking an elder if some troubling news was true. Curious, Eddie peeked through a slightly open door, eavesdropping on a serious conversation about suspicious individuals seen around town. Inside, two men discussed the newcomers. They were from Mage, carrying swords with the kingdom's coat of arms, and asking if anyone had seen a great disaster or a person with immense mana. It was clear they were searching for someone. Eddie immediately understood they were looking for the sage. He briefly wondered if Princess Clarice had broken her promise, but quickly dismissed the idea, trusting she would keep his secret. Suddenly, a maid appeared, startling him. He waved his hands frantically, insisting it was nothing. But his mind was racing. He was almost certain these men were messengers from the king of Mage, sent to investigate the Demon King's defeat. Panicked, Eddie muttered that he knew this would happen and bolted up the stairs, leaving the confused maid behind. As he walked, his thoughts cleared. He had expected them to come sooner or later. They were being discreet to avoid involving the Madison Kingdom in their search for the sage, which would cause political trouble for his father, a Margrave. He made up his mind. To protect his family from getting involved, he would deal with this himself. He decided to go talk to the king of Mage and settle things once and for all. With grim determination, Eddie recalled that he'd already prepared a contingency plan for a situation just like this. He found his eldest brother, Logan, and put his plan into motion. Logan asked if he'd forgotten something at school. Eddie played the part of a forgetful child perfectly, claiming he dropped his good luck coin at the academy. When Logan offered the carriage, Eddie immediately shot down the idea, feigning panic. With puppy dog eyes, he begged Logan to use his transfer magic to sneak him there. He explained that if their parents found out he brought a treasure to school, he'd be in big trouble. Of course, this was all a lie. Eddie's true plan revolved around the teleport magic he acquired after defeating the Demon King. He had enough mana for a one-way trip, but not for the return journey. He needed someone with transfer magic to send him to his destination, and his only options were his father or his eldest brother. He would then use his own powerful teleportation to come back home. Logan was hesitant, worried about letting his little brother go alone. But Eddie puffed up his chest, insisting that as a first-year student at the Royal Academy, he was more than capable of handling things himself. Still worried, Logan relented. He told Eddie he would go along with the plan, but he would return in the carriage with their other brother, Max, who was still at the school. Eddie pleaded with his most convincing, innocent expression. Finally swayed, Logan nodded, declaring it was his duty as an older brother to prepare the world for Eddie. Completely manipulated, he happily agreed to prepare the transfer magic. As Logan began drawing the complex magic circle, he gave a stern warning. Don't touch the circle, because if the technique is altered, it could lead to disaster. Eddie meekly agreed. Eddie mentally noted how quick and accurate his brother's work was. The magic circle used precise longitude and latitude for the destination, which meant that if he were to rewrite just a small part, his plan would be set. The moment Logan announced the circle was complete, Eddie sprang his trap, pointing and shouting that there was a mouse behind the desk. While his brother was distracted, Eddie seized the opportunity to quickly rewrite the coordinates on the magic circle. When Logan gave up the search, he turned and told a smiling Eddie to get in the circle. With his secret mission now underway, Eddie stepped onto the teleportation circle, and it immediately began to glow with immense power. A sly smile crossed Eddie's face as a brilliant flash of light enveloped him, and in an instant he was gone. The scene changes, showing a majestic castle overlooking a city. This was clearly not the Royal Academy. Eddie materialized in the middle of a grand throne room. He turned to face the room's sole occupant, an old man with a long beard, who immediately demanded to know who he was. Eddie found himself face to face with the king of Mage, a stern-looking ruler with long gray hair and a crown, sitting upon his throne. With a confidence far beyond his years, Eddie addressed the monarch directly. "Weren't you looking for me, king?" he asked, suggesting they should have talk. Just then, a knock came from the door as a guard called out, asking if His Majesty needed anything. The king, his eyes filled with interest at the little boy who appeared from nowhere, dismissed the guard. The king calmly sent his guard away. Eddie, internally praising the king's composure, cheekily pointed out how careless it was not to have a barrier against transfer magic. The king simply replied that he was experienced enough to sense killing intent. Realizing the king was a man who showed no weakness, Eddie decided to cut to the chase. He asked directly if the king was behind the search for the sage in the kingdom of Madison. A small, knowing smirk appeared on the king's face. He was clearly intrigued by his tiny, audacious visitor. The king acknowledged that a child like Eddie shouldn't exist. He correctly guessed that Eddie wasn't the legendary sage of salvation, but rather a kid with an abnormally high magic capacity. But Eddie wasn't in the mood for games. He bluntly told the king that he didn't have time for small talk because he had a curfew, and he was going to get straight to the point. He looked the king dead in the eye and made his simple, direct request. "Would you leave this sage alone?" The king correctly deduced that Eddie didn't like to stand out, and figured that Princess Clarice must have kept his identity a secret out of respect for his wishes. Eddie continued, making his intentions perfectly clear. He had no interest in working for the sake of any country or even the world. He explained that being forced to use his power for others was a pain. All he wanted, he declared, was to live a carefree life. The king leaned forward on his desk, his expression hardening. He reminded Eddie of a simple truth. The world isn't going to leave someone with his level of power alone. The king then revealed his own motivation. His ultimate goal, he stated with a serious expression, was world peace. He argued that this was why his country wanted to protect Eddie. He didn't want to lose the sage's power, admitting he would use it as a deterrent should the need ever arise. Eddie immediately saw through the political speak, questioning if the king simply intended to use him as a tool for war. Eddie scoffed at the idea of world peace, saying he wasn't interested. The king retorted that without the sage's power as a deterrent, humanity would be helpless against the demons. Seeing it would be a pain to keep refusing, Eddie decided to set some conditions for his cooperation. With a stern finger pointed at the ruler of a nation, Eddie laid out his first term. He would only act as the sage on holidays or after school. His studies came first, and no request could interfere with his grades. He then added that if any other countries tried to recruit him, he would need the king's help to fend them off, cheekily adding that his mana and vitality would suffer if he couldn't focus on his schoolwork. Then, he prepared to state his most important condition. With a fierce determination that defied his small body, he yelled out his ultimate demand: "Do not disturb my peaceful life." He calmly repeated his simple desire. He didn't want to stand out. He just wanted to live a normal, ordinary life. The king listened, a slight smile forming on his lips. Suddenly, the king erupted in laughter. He couldn't help but be amused. He noted that even kings from powerful nations wouldn't dare negotiate with him with such boldness. Impressed, the king agreed to the deal. He told the young sage to become stronger than ever and not to neglect his studies. Eddie smiled, replying that of course he wouldn't. It was his duty as a child. With their business concluded, Eddie stood up to leave, nonchalantly asking the king to give his regards to Princess Clarice. The The king was left speechless, wondering how a child could possess such wisdom. Eddie simply turned back with a playful grin. "Who knows?" he said coyly. "Maybe it's because I'm a sage?" And with that, he vanished. After Eddie disappeared, a guard entered the now-quiet throne room, asking if something had happened. "Your Majesty." The king of Male smirked. He told his guard that yes, something had. An interesting opportunity had just shown itself. A powerful, albeit tiny, new ally had been secured. At the Radcliffe mansion, a young Eddie cheerfully announces his departure. His family voices their concern about him going to help with state affairs, but Eddie reassures them that Princess Clarice will be with him. Seeing he's made up his mind, they don't try to stop him. A woman watches with a worried expression, pleading for him to be careful as he steps onto a glowing magic circle. With a bright smile, Eddie waves goodbye, surrounded by the light of the teleportation magic. He recalls the day he spoke to the king, when they found out he had secretly rewritten a magic circle to travel to the country of Male. His family was shocked when he told them. He explained that he had only agreed to help Male during his vacations. He was just glad he managed to reach an agreement that the king would accept, allowing him to resolve the issues peacefully while keeping a low profile. As soon as he arrives, Male's third princess, Clarice, runs up to him with a huge smile and gives him a tight hug. Eddie awkwardly returns the greeting. He can't help but feel like he's deceiving people since they don't know he has memories from a past life. Princess Clarice suddenly remembers something and apologizes, worried that her father, the king, got angry at Eddie because of her. Eddie tells her not to worry, but Princess Clarice feels responsible. Clenching her fist, she declares that she'll do anything to help him and redeem herself. His first request from the king was to inspect the border that faces the territory of the demonkind. They'll be traveling through the safe parts of Male's territory with 4 escorts. Eddie thinks to himself that this will be a good chance to see how well they can handle an emergency. As he observes the 4 escorts from behind, he notices something is a little off. Princess Clarice, noticing him staring, confidently offers to let him ride with her. But Eddie ignores her and walks towards the escorts. He calls out to them, asking for a moment of their time. Playing the part of a curious child, Eddie asks where all the horses came from. The escorts tell him not to get too close since it's dangerous. Eddie points to one of the horses and asks about it. The guard confirms it belongs to the castle, but he can't help but feel that something's strange. Eddie points out that the horse's ears are moving differently from the others, which made him think it was from another place. One of the guards inspects the horse and is shocked to find it has a fever. He immediately shouts for a replacement. The guard tells Eddie it's a good thing he noticed the horse wasn't feeling well before they left. Eddie just smiles, glad they found out in time. From a distance, one of the other men wonders who the small child is. Princess Clarice explains that he's a sharp boy from a neighboring country who helped her out. As thanks, the king invited him to their country. She then leans in and whispers to Eddie, praising him for being the only one to notice the horse's sickness. Eddie gets flustered and quietly admits he just used a bit of magic. Princess Clarice smiles and gestures for him to keep it a secret between them. With the horse situation sorted, the group begins their journey. Princess Clarice rides with Eddie, who looks a little uncomfortable being held so close as they travel through the woods. After some time, they take a break, and Eddie gets off the horse to stretch his arms. Nearby, they discover a rope bridge that has completely collapsed into the river below. Eddie finds the scene strange. He reasons that if a powerful storm had destroyed the bridge, the river would be muddy, but the water is clear. This means it must have fallen very recently. He concludes that something other than a storm was the cause. Princess Clarice tells the guards to water the horses while they figure things out. Eddie inspects a piece of the rope and shows it to the princess. It's been cleanly cut by a sword, meaning someone deliberately destroyed the bridge. Forced to take another path, they travel down a rough and uneven road. Eddie asks one of the guards if the road is always this bumpy. The guard replies that it looks like someone rode through here in a great hurry. One of the escorts looks towards some pillars in the distance, wondering aloud if the people who were in a hurry also crossed the bridge before it fell. The camera pans over to show the remains of the second bridge, also destroyed. Princess Clarice puts the pieces together. Someone crossed the bridge in a rush and then cut the rope. Eddie wonders aloud why they would want to stop anyone from following them. Suddenly, Princess Clarice's eyes widen as she spots something in the distance. One of the guards suspects that humans were being chased and cut the bridge to escape. He orders the princess and Eddie to wait there while his men scout the area. A moment later, a guard comes running back in a panic, shouting that there's a corpse in the forest. As the group approaches the body, Princess Clarice quickly moves to cover Eddie's eyes. Trying to act brave, Eddie hugs her back, telling her that he's scared but it will be all right. He then asks to be put down. Princess Clarice agrees, but warns him not to leave her side. Looking closer, they realize the body is that of a werewolf. The scene provides some context. In this area, besides humans, there are 3 other powerful species: werewolves, dragonutes, and vampires. They were once a great threat until a human sage bound them to a non-aggression pact. Eddie stares at the body, silently wondering what a werewolf was doing in human territory. Believing the werewolf died from the arrow in its back, Princess Clarice moves to pull it out, but Eddie quickly grabs her arm and tells her to stop. He whispers to her that the arrow is probably poisoned. The princess gasps in shock, covering her mouth. Eddie explains his reasoning. The arrow wound isn't deep and didn't hit the heart. There's also very little blood, meaning the cause of death wasn't the physical injury. He points out that there's only one set of hoof prints, so he wasn't shot by pursuers nearby. Princess Clarice realizes the only explanation is poison, and Eddie specifies that it must have been a slow-acting one. The princess is stunned by his knowledge, commenting that it feels like she's talking to an older person. Panicking, Eddie quickly claims he read about it in his favorite adventure novel. One of the guards remarks on what amazing books he must be reading, but Eddie quickly changes the subject. He reaches into the werewolf's clothing, telling the princess he's found something. He pulls out a rolled-up scroll. It seems to be a secret message. He suggests the werewolf was likely ambushed while trying to deliver it, and tells the princess they should read it. Princess Clarice examines the scroll and realizes it's written in the werewolf language. She asks if anyone can read it, but the guards just look at each other in confusion. Eddie knows that it's nearly impossible for humans to learn the language of other species, especially the reclusive werewolves. But thanks to his past life, he can read it perfectly. He remembers studying languages to pass the time. As he peeks at the letter, his eyes go wide. The message is an order for the werewolf army to attack the dragonutes upstream at noon. Without a word, Eddie grabs Princess Clarice by the arm and pulls her away from the others, much to her surprise. He tells her that according to the letter, the werewolves are about to attack the dragonutes. The princess is shocked by this revelation. She asks if he's absolutely sure. Eddie quickly lies, saying he's seen all the words in a book before. To sell his story, he points to different symbols on the page, translating them as army, river, attack, and noon. Eddie admits that it's probably weird to blindly trust a child's word, but Princess Clarice looks at him with determination. She tells him that despite her title, she's still a knight. And as a knight, she doesn't doubt someone she's decided to believe in. His knowledge is a wonder, and she trusts it. She smiles, agreeing to keep the part about him deciphering the message a secret, and says she'll forward his input to the knights. Turning back to her escorts, Princess Clarice announces that the message contains instructions to attack the dragonutes at noon. The guards are stunned, asking how she's able to read the werewolves' language. She clears her throat and explains that a foreign friend taught her, describing a genius who taught her some keywords, which allowed her to understand the message. Her escorts are completely amazed, remarking on how smart that person must be. The princess puffs her chest out proudly, enjoying the praise, while Eddie just stares blankly. One of the guards brings them back to the pressing issue, suggesting the werewolf was likely on his way to deliver the message to reinforcements. Eddie innocently asks what happens if a war breaks out between them. The princess explains the dire consequences. The non-aggression pact keeps the strong demonkin like werewolves and dragonutes in check. If they start fighting each other, The vampires won't waste the opportunity and will begin treating the weaker humans as food. This means they absolutely have to stop the war. But with no time to call for reinforcements, their small group will have to manage it on their own before the vampires break the pact and invade human territory. During their secret mission, one of the knights grows worried, realizing that if war breaks out, everything will be over. Her concern causes Eddie to flinch, sensing that trouble is already near. Suddenly, Eddie spins around, shouting a warning that something is approaching. Clarice immediately goes on guard, telling Eddie to get behind her for protection. An ominous feeling hangs in the air. The group tenses up as heavy, thudding footsteps echo from the trees, shaking the ground with each step. From the woods emerges a massive, imposing warrior with horns and scales. It's a dragonut, one of the most powerful demonic species. The group finds themselves surrounded. In the distance, another dragonut sits on horseback, blocking their path. Clarice and Eddie stare ahead, knowing they're trapped. The dragonut leader looks down on them with disdain, his fangs showing as he sneers at the sight of humans in his territory. His massive foot crashes down, sending dirt flying. The knights shudder in fear, but Clarice stands her ground, refusing to back down and declaring she will fight. The dragonut leader smirks, telling them there's no need for swords, then remembers they can't understand him. But Eddie, listening intently, recognizes the words as the dragonut's language. Eddie knows that the others can't understand a word. He's the only one who can comprehend what the demons are saying. The dragonut leader, believing he isn't understood, thinks aloud. He seems to be tracking a dead werewolf and mentions a secret message, confirming the intel Eddie had found earlier. Just as the tension reaches its peak, Clarice asks if anyone can understand the demonic language. To everyone's shock, she steps forward and declares, "I can speak it." The dragonut leader's expression turns menacing. He demands to know what the humans are doing there, adding a chilling threat. "Depending on your answer, I might kill you." One of the knights panics, remembering the terrifying reputation of the dragonutes. He mutters that a single one can destroy an army, and against this many, they don't stand chance. Clarice takes a deep breath to calm herself and the others. She then addresses the dragonut leader in his own language, explaining that they're soldiers from Melee, only there to scout, not to fight. The dragonut repeats the word scouting with suspicion. Meanwhile, one of the knights whispers in disbelief, noticing that Clarice's demonic language sounds a little strange. Eddie watches silently, recalling the non-aggression pact that should prevent demons from entering human lands. He's determined to find out why they've broken it. Hiding behind Clarice, Eddie admits he's scared. He knows the dragonutes are still suspicious, so they need to prove they aren't a threat. The dragonut leader notices Eddie for the first time. The plan was to use the alias Clara for the princess to protect her royal identity. Seeing a child with them, the dragonutes conclude they probably aren't here to fight. They decide Clarice is telling the truth and order the humans to leave, as they have business with a werewolf corpse. Clarice offers her thanks as the group prepares to leave. Eddie sighs in relief, thinking they managed to escape. But one of the dragonutes is still examining the body. Suddenly, the dragonut stops and sniffs the air. He catches a scent and calls out to the departing humans. While inspecting the werewolf's body, the dragonut finds nothing. There's no secret message on him, which deepens his suspicion. Then he makes a grim discovery. The corpse reeks of humans. The dragonut leader's face darkens as he realizes they've been lied to. Just as the group thinks they're safe, a voice booms from behind, "Hold on, humans." Their escape is cut short. The dragonut leader turns on them, his eyes narrowed. He asks if they tampered with the corpse, specifically if they took a message from it. Clarice nervously denies it, but the dragonut's sinister grin shows he doesn't believe her for a second. Caught in their lie, the dragonut leader gives them a final, humiliating order. All of them must strip so he can search for the message himself. The group is frozen in shock and fear. Clarice desperately tries to reason with him, stating that they are royal knights who should be treated with respect. But the dragonut just laughs, mocking their appeal to manners before grabbing her cloak, declaring that ladies go first. He yanks her forward with a vicious grin, sneering as he tells her to be the first to strip. One of the knights cries out her name in alarm. Realizing the situation is hopeless, Clarice urges Eddie to escape alone. But Eddie knows better. He thinks to himself that escaping now is completely out of the question. With no other choice, Eddie leans in and whispers a question to Clarice. "How confident are you in your swordsmanship, princess?" Clarice clenches her gauntlet, her resolve hardening. She proudly declares that her skill with a sword is second to none, a fact even her father, the king, has recognized. Hearing this, Eddie breaks into a reassuring smile. If her skill is acknowledged by the king himself, then that's all he needs to know. Eddie asks her to fight the dragonut with her sword while he provides magic support. Clarice hesitates, admitting that while she's unbeaten among humans, she's never faced a demon. Suddenly, she remembers her promise to keep Eddie's powers a secret. Touched by her kindness, even in this crisis, Eddie promises he'll protect her. He thanks her for her concern and calmly explains his plan. He'll simply put the other guards to sleep so they won't witness his magic. With a newfound determination, Eddie declares, "Let's fight together, princess." Inspired by his courage, Clarice agrees, vowing to wield her sword for him. While they were strategizing, Eddie had already put the other knights to sleep. The dragonut leader grows impatient, yelling at them to stop whispering and get on with it. With a battle cry, Clarice charges forward, sword raised high. The dragonut leader is momentarily surprised by her sudden offensive. He roars, "You damned humans," as he brings his own massive weapon up to block her attack, their blades meeting with a deafening clang. Eddie watches her form, impressed by her speed. Her attack was a test, allowing him to see her fighting style. Clarice unleashes a swift strike, her blade connecting with the dragonut's arm. But her sword merely scrapes against his tough scales, doing no damage. The dragonut smirks, condescendingly telling her that her attack tickles. Her attack having failed, the dragonut effortlessly counters with a powerful punch, sending Clarice flying. The force of the blow sends her stumbling backwards across the clearing, grunting from the impact. She's completely outmatched in raw strength. Eddie rushes to her side as she catches her breath. She apologizes for being unable to land a solid blow, but Eddie reassures her, saying he now understands her movements and they can work together. The dragonut scoffs at them, confident that no plan of theirs will work. Eddie knows that a simple magic enhancement for a sword user is a common tactic, and it won't be enough here. Eddie thinks to himself, he can't let the dragonut know he's a magic user. His plan needs to be more clever, making it seem as if Princess Clarice is fighting entirely on her own. He believes that together, he and the princess can win this fight. Filled with new resolve, Clarice lets out a powerful war cry. Eddie begins to cast his spell, a subtle gust of wind swirling around him as he prepares to support Clarice from the shadows. He slams his hand on the ground, secretly channeling a powerful spell through the earth. The ground cracks as energy flows into Clarice's sword, causing it to glow. "Get a miss," he shouts. "Okay," Clarice yells, her blade now engulfed in a swirling, dark aura. She feels an incredible power coursing through her, ready to be unleashed. The dragonut leader stares in shock at the immense power radiating from Clarice's sword. Taking a deep breath, Clarice focuses all her energy into one single thought: blow him away. She swings her sword with all her might, unleashing a massive, swirling vortex of what she calls fiery winds directly at her enemy. The dragonut is engulfed in the magical flames, his armor burning intensely as he screams in agony from the incredible heat. The battlefield falls silent, with all the dragonuts knocked unconscious. Clarice stares in awe at what she's done, while Eddie calmly explains that since iron armor conducts heat, the dragonut's tough scales became completely irrelevant. Eddie immediately showers her with praise, blushing as he tells her how strong she is. Clarice insists it was his magic that was amazing, but Eddie quickly denies it. He draws a quick diagram to prove that he only sent fire through the ground to strengthen her sword, and that it was her own superior swordsmanship that mastered the technique. Changing the subject, Eddie says he was just providing support. Clarice, still trying to process everything, picks up the secret message from the werewolf's body to keep it safe. Eddie then asks her what she plans to do next. Clarice closes her eyes, the weight of their discovery settling heavily on her shoulders. As the princess of Melee, she declares that she must stop the war between the werewolves and dragonutes, as it would bring ruin to all humans. Eddie reminds her that humans are no match for either demonic race. She knows it's a difficult task, especially since demons look down on humans. However, she believes they must exhaust all options for peace and figure out what the dragonutes want before resorting to force. With unwavering conviction, she tells Eddie that even if the other side refuses to listen, she still wants to make the effort to talk to them. Eddie cheekily asks if destroying the enemy is an option, which horrifies Clarice. Seeing her reaction, he agrees to help, and her face instantly brightens with gratitude. Eddie muses on her words, reflecting that they can't just jump to conclusions and call all demonkind dangerous. They need to talk and understand each other. He tells her she sounds just like her father, a king who seeks world peace. He then asks if she truly believes such a thing is possible. With a gentle, encouraging smile, Eddie tells her that no matter how difficult the path may be, he is sure that she is the one who can achieve it. His faith in her brings a brilliant smile to her face. She thanks him, saying that if he believes in her, then she knows it will come true. Meanwhile, the defeated dragonut leader staggers to his feet, still in disbelief over the attack. Clarice stands over a fallen demon and issues a bold command in their tone. "Bring me your leader within 1 hour."